Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Faces of NextGen Live. I'm Eric Wells with Legacy Left Right, and I'm also the education coordinator for the NextGen Genealogy Society. And so I am very, very excited today because I'm enjoying doing these episodes and getting to know several genealogists. And today, with us today, is Erin Taylor of Reclaimed Ancestors fame. Hey, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you, Eric? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being had. No, no problem, no problem. Now you and I were introduced to each other through Beth, and our mutual friend Beth, and this is one of the first times we're actually meeting, so this is going to be fun.
It is. I'm really excited about the opportunity. Beth would not tell you this, but we are actually South Carolina cousins.
Well, so you share family in South Carolina?
We do.
What's the family name?
The family name is, well, it goes back to an ancestor named Violet Moore, who came over. She's probably second or third generation Irish immigrant. And I have really tried to push on to Beth that we are related, that we are kin. She keeps calling me in public her friend and associate, but she's my cousin.
Yeah, they need to be cousins. Well, let's get on her about that.
Right.
Well, you have a couple of places that you're on the web, like you run your Reclaimed Ancestors blog.
Right.
And you've got, and what do you talk about there?
On the Reclaimed Ancestors?
Yep.
Yeah. So Reclaimed Ancestors is just where I sort of market my family history and my interests. And so I'm often asked to speak on the really gruesome, depressing topics. Like when people see me come, they're like, oh, it's that lady again with her scary stuff. So I talk a lot about people who were the victims of a past serious crime. I work on a big case where a woman was murdered in Arkansas that's related to my family. Both of my first female ancestors to come to the New World were both executed in the 17th century on both sides of my family. So we talk about that. I also work a lot with institutional history, people who are institutionalized due to disability, mental illness, or chronic conditions. So I'm a bucket full of joyful news.
Well, this should be a very fun interview then. I'll have to throw in some jokes maybe to liven it up.
I've got black humor down.
But honestly, some of that stuff kind of fascinates me too. I think I've got a few ancestors myself who either were or should have been in an institution while they were, alive.
Absolutely.
So when did you first start getting interested in genealogy? What was the key, the trigger there?
So I was not raised in the United States. I was raised in Central America, mainly Costa Rica. My parents were in the Foreign Service. So I really have no connection to my cousins, my aunts and uncles, or sort of living daily American experiences, U.S. history, and things like that. And when I was 14, my great aunt Dot Zoo sent me a genealogy that she had done. And it went back to 1640s Plymouth. And in it, she had just blacked out the name of every ancestor she found distasteful. So that was every Quaker, every Catholic, anyone who drank, anyone who sang anywhere but a church, anyone who voted in the wrong political party, anyone who'd been divorced. And those blacked out names, like a redacted FBI document, fascinated me. I was like, who are those people? Those people are my kin. And so I was interested in that. But certainly in the mid-1980s, it's really hard for a kid to figure out, who has a love of history, how genealogy is a career. So that's why things like NextGen are so great, because it really identifies professional pathways for younger adults to make a living out of their passion.
Yeah, I agree. I stumbled on the NextGen totally by accident after doing my own family research. I'm like, I want to do some more of this. Are there people like me that are somewhat young? I mean, I'm no spring chicken, but
I'm second tier NextGen.
Okay. Well, I was NextGen at younger at one point, in my 20s at one point, and even in my 30s at one point. But the NextGen has kind of helped me step into that passion a little bit more by connecting with folks that I connect with a little bit more.
Right.
So it was 14 that when you got interested in genealogy, and have you just kind of made that a hobby, or is this something that you now do for a living?
Well, I have 5 children, so I do them for a living. And as they're moving out, I still have a job professionally. I work as a disability advocate, so I work a lot on policy. I teach at the university. I work at Congress and the legislature and all that. So that doesn't leave a lot of time for my hobby. But I am sort of transitioning, like you, into doing that more and finding a way that I can do more speaking engagements and learn myself, get some more classes. So
It sounds like mental health is kind of a passion for you, both in your job and also in genealogy. Is that accurate?
yeah, and the truth is my youngest child was born with a pretty significant heart condition, and he had 8 cardiothoracic surgeries and a heart transplant by the age of 5, and in the process incurred a brain injury. So he has an intellectual disability. Love of history and genealogy. I've always looked at that kid and thought, wow, what would his life have been like if he had been born 30 years ago
Oh,
or
wow.
3 years ago? So, I think we all have those experiences of our current family life and looking around at, the people we love and some of the characters in our family and wondering what's the legacy? What are these people like if they lived in another space and time?
Yeah, what did they have to work with? What options were available to them if they had this disability, or if they were in this particular, or if they had these particular set of skills or something like that?
And specifically for people with disabilities and mental health, I think our perception is that things have consistently gotten better across the centuries. But truthfully, even for a person with, let's say, Down syndrome or autism or schizophrenia, to be alive in 17th century America than in 19th century America. Because by 19th century America, we have these massive warehouses and institutions and a belief that these people should be by society. So that's an important lesson we need to know as Americans, is that we're not always making great social progress.
Yeah, we kind of went backwards, and it seems like we're kind of trying to catch up now here in the late 20th and 21st centuries. Now, I think that if I recall, there was a colony, a group of people who had in New England back in the 17th and 18th centuries who had a deafness that ran throughout the families, and they thrived just in this community alone, coming up with their own set of sign language. And
that's Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, Martha's Vineyard. That's right.
Yeah. Podcast on things you should have learned in history class about that deaf community. Yeah. I just learned that too very recently.
Okay, cool. So you've done some research, and you probably got a good start from your grandmother, who gave you that redacted family tree. But you've begun to get to know, and you probably know some of your ancestors really well. Is there any ancestor that you would really want to meet, like just to go back in time and ask them questions, or even more gruesomely, resurrect them or bring them back to life and ask them questions?
I thought about this. I really would say there are 3 of them. First of all, there's Sally Six Killer, who is my 4 times great grandmother, who came to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears. I know virtually nothing about Native American history and my Native American ancestry. But then, of course, I'd want to meet my 9 and 10 times great grandmothers who were executed in Massachusetts. One as a witch, and technically she was executed for mouthing off to the judge. And then who murdered her 4-year-old daughter for no cause or reason.
Wow. Who was the second, your 9th great grandmother? What was her name?
Sorry, I lost connection there for a minute.
It's okay. Who was your ninth great grandmother? What was her name? The one who mouthed
My
off.
great grandmother is Martha Allen Carrier. She's very, very well researched in the Salem witch trials. And actually, Carrier, Oklahoma is where my Oklahoma roots start. And those were her fourth and fifth descendants who settled a small town in Oklahoma during the Cherokee Strip.
That's interesting. What was one of your most surprising discoveries that you made along your research?
Well, the murders are always a downer. I would say also to find out that there's a picture in my family of a baby who was born with a rather apparent disability. And she's probably 3 or 4 generations back. There's one picture of her, and nobody knows who she is, and nobody remembers her name. And we're not exactly sure whose child she was. We just know she was put away in an institution and never heard from again. Close to my experience with my child, that it's really kind of, it's poignant and sad for me to look at that picture and know we lost that family member there, and probably the heartache her family went through with that choice.
So you don't have a name for the baby or anything, and it just disappeared into the mental.
That's all we know.
What was that?
It's likely he was sent to one of the Catholic therapeutic foster homes in Louisiana in the 1930s.
Oh wow. That is kind of sad.
It is.
And did you discover this picture, or was it did you discover the story, or?
I remember my grandmama telling me about there was a baby, she wasn't right, she had to be put away, we don't talk about her and all that. And then I found the picture after my grandmama died, but by that time everybody was gone. Mm-hmm. And so the few cousins that are remaining, I've sort of shopped around the picture, and everyone's like, yeah, that's that baby, but we can't remember which aunt, uncle, cousin had that baby. We just know she had to be put away.
One of the more powerful things for me as I was doing research is discovering young family members who passed away. Like who is this birth certificate? Why does it have the same family surname as mine? And then making the connection as to that they are actually a relative of mine. It feels like you're bringing back the memory of someone who was forgotten, and that right. Feels important, and that feels like satisfying in a sense.
That's really why I called my genealogy company Reclaimed Ancestors, because I'm less interested in my Mayflower ancestors. I care more about those names and those stories we lost. I have a wonderful friend named Abby Burnett who writes about gravestone and cemetery hitch in the South. And she is always sending me these gravestones of people who died very young, people who died and they likely had a disability or a chronic condition and all that. Those shouldn't be forgotten. Those really shouldn't be footnotes, because that's some mom's heartbreak that she never overcame. That's some big brother who wishes his little sister had survived. That's some hard stuff.
Yeah, in some sense, it's easy to trace back the survivors in a family tree, but the folks who didn't survive and didn't have children, didn't pass on their genes to children or whatever, they don't make it into family trees.
They don't. And that's also true for people who were institutionalized. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they'll have a fake obituary printed for them, or they just lived there all their lives. If you're placed in an institution at 3 or 4 years old, a year, absolved of your family.
Yeah, and you said a state obituary. Do you want to describe that a little more?
I'm sorry, can you say that?
Yes, a state obituary. What do you want to describe that a little more?
Well, so what will happen in an institutionalization is, especially if the child is born with an apparent disability or the family feels like there's not much they can do for them in home, they can be placed very young and placed in an institution. Age before we have special education, the Americans with Disabilities Act. I've lost you again. Hold on.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
All right, sorry. You know, we don't have these protections and supports around. So, you know, many times if the child is not going to be safe and if the family cannot find a way to care for its medical needs and therapeutic needs, they're placed in an institution. But in Oklahoma, for example, our institutions were spread all over a large state. So a person could be placed hundreds of miles from home. Their family maybe can afford the transportation to see them once or twice a year. They're not allowed to leave. They're not allowed to date. They're not allowed to get a job. They're not allowed to attend the church they want. These are incarcerated persons.
Yeah. Got it. That's pretty powerful research, and I'm really grateful that you are learning about this kind of stuff, because it's not something that I would definitely come across, but it's something that is very like I wouldn't necessarily come across it as often as perhaps you have in your own research, but I'm really grateful that you can give me the appreciation for these people's situations that don't, like we said earlier, don't make it into the family trees. That's really, really cool. So do you have any favorite books?
Like? Yes, this is going to get so much better, I promise.
Okay.
So, I thought about this too, and I pulled out my favorite like skill book, which is Applied Genealogy by Eugene Stratton, which is the holy grail, and everyone should read this, even though this is long before the internet. The skills for analyzing evidence is so well done. This is a great book. And then the other book that I've read that I think it's the most important history book I've ever read is The American Slave Coast by Ned and Constance Sublight. It's a big book. I think it's 800 pages. But
what is it called? The American Slave Coast?
The American Slave Coast. And the truth of the matter is that my ancestors benefited from the slave trade and slave economy and the breeding industry, not just in Alabama and Mississippi, but as far up as Rhode Island. They all benefited from that. So I think it's a very, very important part of American history. And if a historian, a reader can commit to a year of getting through that book, it'll absolutely be worth it.
Got it. You said it's about 1,000 pages or so?
I think it's 800. It's 800. Just 800.
Yeah, well, that's not too bad. That's like the whole Lord of the Rings set, or maybe 3/4 of the Lord of the Rings. Do you have a favorite place you like researching? Like,
Yes. So I am the get in the mud kind of girl. I don't want to go to the National Archives. I don't want to sit in front of my internet. I want to have trespassing charges against me, as my husband will point out. So I'm working on a murder that happened in 1912 in Arkansas that was very grisly. And my great-grandfather was actually the judge in the case. And I've gone down to the murder site. I have gone into the backwoods and all that to try to sort of recreate that space. My 10 times murdering great-grandmother committed her crime in Plymouth. And so I've gone into the recreated Plymouth village and sort of worked through that home space, because it absolutely wasn't how I visualized it. And we got very CSI about it. Me and my research colleague, Kristen Luce, sort of tried to figure out how the blood spray would have gone and whether the ladder was sturdy to transport the body. And some.
Oh, that sounds kind of neat, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that the village lets you spray fake blood everywhere, but.
No, but I mean, genealogy should be a little bit of dirty work. You should be dusty and, you know, break a nail and break a sweat.
And I take like Claritin or something before I go into the get down and dirty in the back rooms of. That's my armor or my weapon is an allergy medication, an antihistamine.
Exactly, I know. Yeah, the dust mask. Exactly.
So you have areas, an area of interest in the institutionalization of some of our ancestors. But is there any other area that you'd like to learn more about that you don't necessarily have experience in?
So because I have these criminal events that I'm researching in my own family, I'm really trying to learn about investigation work on the beginning of forensics in U.S. history, and how, what was happening in Chicago and New York in their police departments was not happening in Boone County, Arkansas, where I'm researching. So learning those science and those techniques has been interesting. It's been good. And it's important that when you're looking back at a criminal event, you really understand the context and limitations of the time. So people will ask me all the time, well, what does the DNA evidence say? And I'm like, well, they didn't swab her cheek. I'm sorry. It was 1648.
Even in the very early 20th century, fingerprinting was really only available to large cities because of the expense.
Right. Right. And this murder case in Boone County, Arkansas, which is really close to the Missouri border, it just happened that the one doctor in the entire county had just bought a microscope. And it was the only microscope for 4 or 5 counties. And he actually did an initial rape kit examination using his microscope. That was fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And when was this? What was the year of this again?
1912.
Oh, wow. That was pretty early to even care about that, in a sense.
Right.
So we talked earlier about getting into genealogy more and more, and out of like making it something that we can make a living off of. Do you currently take clients?
So my goal is probably not to take clients. I believe that I believe in certified genealogists, people who have taken classes, who are really the scientists of proving those relationships. I'm a historian. Around is historiographical methods and all. So what I really want to be is a family history educator. I want to, fire people up to learn new pathways to exploring their family history and the social history. I don't take directly clients like that.
I love it. That's kind of cool. Is that something that you might write some books about in the future?
I have written 3 books, and altogether, I think I paid $19. So I'm not sure I have another book in me, but I definitely have some extended articles and big blogs in me. Alice Martin Bishop, about my 10 times great-grandmother who killed her daughter, has 40 entries into it that are pretty thoroughly researched and all that with my colleagues. So I'm much more interested in that kind of writing than churning out a book and finding a publisher.
Got it. When you first started doing your genealogy, what was something that you wish you had known? Like, if you could go back in time and tell your younger self, hey, you need to focus on this, you need to figure this out, and then what would that be?
I wish that somebody at the beginning had said, hold your horses. Because I think, especially in this internet age, we become like data junkies. And within 3 hours, you've traced yourself back to Charlemagne, because we're all related to Charlemagne. And what happens is that
if not Charlemagne related to
yourself
or something.
I wish that somebody had said to me, stick to your paternal grandfather for a year and his family, or make sure that you collect these 5 documents before you go back one step further and all that stuff. Because when you have to go back, it's kind of a downer. You're like, well, I think I'm related to her, but I actually have no proof.
Yeah. So make that connection solid before moving on is kind of what you're suggesting.
Genealogy is science. It's not just a habit, and it's not just, I feel like she's my great-grandmother.
Right.
It really is a science that we should value that. Yeah. Got
it. Do you attend conventions?
I have not attended conventions, although Beth and I are looking for one next year. I am sadly going to Salt Lake City next week for an entire week. for my job as a disability advocate and have zero time to do any research. So I'm bummed out about that. But I'm thinking about what I want to commit to financially for next year.
Got it. And where can people find you on the web? We talked about reclaimedancestors.com, but you're also on Twitter, and where else?
I'm on Twitter at Okie Erin, which is OKIEERIN. And then the big blog about my murdering great grandmother is AliceMartinBishop.com.
Perfect.
And I'm writing, hopefully I'll have a new blog out about this 1912 Arkansas murder maybe by next summer.
I'm excited to follow what you're writing, because I'm getting chills kind of just hearing you talk about the murder and talk about your 10 times.
I need in Boone County. It's not that far from you, and I need help. Listen, you can get trespassing charged with me.
Sure, you got it. I'm learning my my lock picking skills, so maybe you can open up a gate or two.
There's this one point where the murder victim was a young woman, and she's dragged across a field of rocks for about 100 yards. And I've made my husband reenact this so many times that he's pretty creeped out. He won't go on any more trips with me.
Well, if I'm going to be your surrogate husband, I don't want to go with you and get drugged 100 yards on rocks or anything like that. So.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it's all good things in the job.
Sounds like Indiana Jones or something, where he's being drugged behind a car.
It is.
Yeah, I hear those stories where they get drawn, they get drugged through the town, either by horseback or behind a car, and it sounds awful. I mean, I played soccer as a kid, and or even baseball, and I've slid just a few feet into second base or on the grass, and I get torn up on the side. I can't imagine going 100 feet, let alone further than that. It just sounds awful.
Well, this young woman was horrifically mutilated, and my great-grandfather, who was the judge and presided over the trial, basically hanged the accused person before he technically had permission to do so. And the place where that man hanged in Boone County, Arkansas, is now, interestingly enough, the domestic violence shelter.
That's I don't know how to feel about that.
That's karma.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's irony. Yeah, good for that spot.
Yeah.
Well, Erin, do you have anything else you want to say before we sign off here?
I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm so excited to be a part of this community, even though I'm sort of medieval in the next gen. I'm sort of aging out, but really to continue on my path to making this more than a hobby.
Yeah, this was I really enjoyed talking with you, and this was and also getting to know you. This was a great interview. Thank you so much for setting aside some time to introduce yourself to us.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. Well, guys, that's going to wrap it up for our interview today. I'm going to sign off. I want to thank you again for joining us. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have another one. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet. I'm kind of still ironing out the details, but if it all works out, it's going to be pretty darn cool. I don't know if it's going to be as cool as this interview, Erin, because this was an awesome interview. They all kind of have like their different overall feelings, and this was both like a murder mystery.
I feel creepy. I get it.
No, it was thrilling. I don't know if it's the inside of the feeling of thrilling is this creepy stuff, but that's still kind of thrilling. I like that stuff. I like getting scared and the whodunit type of stuff. So anyways. Well, thanks again, Erin. We're going to sign off, and I will see you guys next time around. Look for the events on Facebook and on Twitter, and also here on YouTube. All right. See you guys later.